Yes, he's had a tough time of against New Zealand, but his record here is unbelievable, averages 54, and he's always been up for a fight. He's a natural fighter, a competitor, loves to get in the contest. So whilst he's getting towards the back end of his career, I'm loath to write him off.
Simon Katich, a key part of Channel 7's commentary team this summer. Welcome to the podcast. And first off the bat, the West Test, how important is it to get some good crowds there this weekend?
Thanks very much for having me, Glen. Yeah, look, it is really important because I think the fixture itself has become a magnificent test match. The wicket has played beautifully over the last sort of 5 years or so that they've been playing there. And I think it reminds me of the old whacker wicket, the way it cracks up, the pace and bounce in it. And I think probably the biggest difference is that the spinners have played a role, and particularly Nathan Lyon. His record in Perth at this venue at Optus Stadium has been superb. So I think it brings everyone into the game. It's a very good cricket wicket. Class players have been able to get big scores there. I know guys like Labuschagne and Smith and these guys have enjoyed batting there. And I think we saw a brilliant test match against India a few years ago where Australia won it. And I don't think Australia defeated it, Perth, so at Optus Stadium. So I think, promises to be a fantastic series between two very evenly matched teams, 1 and 2 in the test rankings. But hopefully this time around, we'll see some big numbers go through the gates because I think that just adds another element to test cricket when you've got plenty of eyeballs. We know there's going to be plenty of eyeballs in India watching from afar, but it'd be nice to have a massive turnout in Perth for this test because it could set the tone for what is a magnificent series.
So people talk about the old whacker wicket and this wicket, but it's the same block of clay from the southwest, a place called Waroona. Just talk to us about what the difference is batting on the Perth pitch as opposed to other pitches around the world.
Well, I never got to play at Optus Stadium, but from what I can gather, all the boys that have played there said it comes on the bat beautifully. It's got good pace and the ball flies. And obviously we see a lot of BBL cricket there played by the Scorchers and the boys there love batting on it. But I think what we've seen in Test cricket here is even you can hear it on the stump mics. You hear as the test evolves and the batsman tapping on the crease, it's got that really distinct sound of the bat, almost like hitting concrete. And that's what it used to be like at the whacker back in the day in sort of the mid-90s, late 90s when I remember it playing for WA. And the cracks as well, it opens up quite big if it's hot enough and in the mid-30s over those sort of 4 or 5 days the test goes, then the cracks can really open up and pose some problems for the batsman, particularly when you're looking down the wicket and seeing them there in front of you. So there's a couple of those sort of traditions that the whacker used to have that are now here at Optus Stadium. But the other big difference, I think, now is that we're seeing that as good spin and bounce, the whacker used to take a little bit of turn, but probably not as much as Optus Stadium. So I just think it's a really good all-round test wicket. And we've got some brilliant test wickets around the country, but I think Optus Stadium's right up there with them.
What for India, coming off that 3-0 loss to New Zealand on the subcontinent? I mean, a very rare for India to lose at home. But on those turning wickets and then coming to the fast bouncy track, how big a challenge is that for India?
It's going to be a huge challenge. I mean, yes, they've won the last couple of series here, but I think the challenge in this series is the first time ever playing 5 tests in a series against Australia. And I think the way it's scheduled, Optus Stadium, pink ball test in Adelaide, and then the Gabba test 3, if India don't adjust from a batting perspective early on, then this series could really get away from them early, particularly if Australia are on the mark. And we know that the Australian attack over the last 4 or 5 years they've been together, they hunt as a pack and they strangle teams, particularly in Australian conditions. They don't give you a lot to score off. And the leader, Pat Cummins, he's the leader of that attack. He generally comes into play when something needs to happen, and he very rarely lets the team down now as skipper. So the Indian batsmen are going to have their work cut out. And obviously, Rohit Sharma sounds like he's missing the first test because of the birth of his second child. It sounds like Shubman Gill's out with a finger injury. So the composition of their top 6 is going to be interesting to see. I think the danger men for India are going to be definitely Rishabh Pant. He was outstanding here last time. And also probably the youngster at the top of the order, Jaiswal, young left-hander. He's been brilliant in the last sort of 12 months. I think they're going to seriously miss Pujara batting at 3. He's been brilliant the last couple of series here when India have won. And it's not always him getting big hundreds. It's him soaking up pressure in the first 30, 40 overs, wearing this Australian attack down. And I think he's going to be a massive loss for India. And I think that's why Australia will win the series.
I think they're talking about moving him up the order. Rahul likely to open, but even he had a bit of a knock on the elbow at a wicket, the Wacker session the other day, so he's not 100%. Virat Kohli. So Virat Kohli, obviously his form has not been great. He's 50, just 150 in his past 10 knocks. I think he averaged 15 in that series against New Zealand. But we know in Australia he's made over 1,300 runs at 54, 6 centuries in 13 tests. He loves playing here. He's at the tail end of his career. What are you expecting from Virat this summer?
I won't be writing him off, that's for sure. I had the pleasure to work with him in IPL at RCB for a few years as coach there, and he was a pleasure to deal with. He's an absolute champion. His preparation is second to none. I mean, I got to play with some amazing players in Australia in that era that prepared unbelievably well, and he probably is king of that sort of preparation in terms of how he goes about it off the field and on the field. Yes, he's had a tough time of against New Zealand, but his record here is unbelievable, averages 54, and he's always been up for a fight. He's a natural fighter, a competitor, loves to get in the contest. So whilst he's getting towards the back end of his career, I'm loath to write him off because he loves playing here and he'll be up for a challenge in this series because India need him to fire. And if he doesn't, then I think Australia will win the series a lot more easily than if he has a big summer.
Yeah, there was talk of him when he was just a young fella coming into that Indian side. He had legends of the game going out of the game like Tendulkar, and apparently he just drove their fitness sessions. Is that what you've experienced with him, and what sort of a person is he like off the field?
Oh, he was magnificent to deal with. I mean, he, as skipper, he was always, we were in a bubble in the UAE where we weren't allowed to leave the hotel, and he and his wife, Anushka, were down every night in the team room, socialising with the group and watching, the games that were on every night. So I couldn't have asked more from him as a skipper. But also, from a playing perspective, I think what I saw of him in his preparation, as I mentioned, I played with guys like Langer and Hussey and Hayden and these guys that prepared unbelievably well, not just with their skills, but also physically. And I think when he was captain of India, he drove those standards, and that's what we're seeing now in their cricket. They weren't well renowned for having a battery of quicks, but now they do. And yes, Mohammad Shami's injured at the moment, but he might be back later in the series. But Bumrah's world class. Siraj did very well here last time. And a couple of the other fringe bowlers as well have improved out of sight. Mukesh Kumar and Akashdeep and these guys that, a couple of years ago, some of them were net bowlers for us in the IPL. So they've come on in leaps and bounds. And a lot of that is due to the professionalism and standards that Virat Kohli set as skipper of India when they had such a very good run in Test cricket and obviously beat us here a couple of times in previous series.
I'm going to throw some names at you. Usman Khawaja, Shane Watson, Greg Blewett, Justin Langer, David Boone, Keith Stackpole, Bob Simpson and Simon Katich. Players who started their Test careers in the middle order and progressed to open for Australia. You did it. Your average was 36 in the middle order, and your average was 50.48 when you went up to open for Australia. What do you make of Nathan McSweeney's selection in the squad? He's going to open. He's going to replace Dave Warner. What are we going to see at the top of the order post-Warner? Because we know the appetite to accumulate quick runs was there for Warner. What are we going to see from McSweeney? Do you agree that it should be McSweeney deserves the spot, or should it be a specialist opener?
Yeah, look, I agree with the decision. And the reason I say that is because I just think they base this on form. And I know McSweeney's traditionally not been an opener, but he has batted at 3 a number of times for South Australia in the last few years. And I know recently, obviously he opened in the second A game at the MCG recently against India A, but batted in sort of the middle order against India A at Mackay in the first match. So, and that's where he played really well under pressure when it was pretty much a bat-off between Bancroft, him, Harris and young Constas from New South Wales. So I think he stood out in that first game. I remember watching a little bit of it, and he just looked like he had the temperament and composure to be able to face the pressure of that challenge. Yes, he didn't. He missed out a little bit in that second game in the MCG when he had to open. But I think the thing about him is he's been consistent over the last probably 18 months for South Australia. They see leadership potential in him, but I also think, much like the decision to bring Cameron Green in earlier in the year and to sort of shuffle Steve Smith up the order to open to accommodate that, I feel like they needed to do this and get some sort of young batting into this lineup, because we're going to see some change in this Australian team in the next couple of years, given Warner's gone, Khawaja's coming towards the end, Steve Smith's coming towards the end, And, that top four engine room, there's potentially three sort of slots there where they'll need some young faces. And Cameron Green's one of those when he's fit. And I think now they've looked at McSweeney at 25 and think that he's got big upside. And I can see why they picked him. I think he looks a lot like Marnus Labuschagne when he bats, so he looks very technically correct. He's got obviously a big role in this series, and it's going to be huge pressure on him and huge scrutiny, and only time will tell how he handles that. But so far, he's looked composed under pressure in those games against India A, and he'll be looking forward to this challenge to go out there and open with Usman Khawaja.
Does it look like they're trying to get some experience into McSweeney? Because when Khawaja moves on, you're going to look for another opener as well, and that could be Constas. It's probably likely to be at this stage. So you've got McSweeney, perhaps, who's been in there for a couple of years, who's already got a bit of experience, and then in comes the rookie, if you like. Is it so important to have experience in that opening too?
Oh, I think so, because I think we've seen in the history of Test cricket that engine room, your top 3 or 4, particularly in these sorts of big series, they need to fire to win you a series. And if you don't, you're relying on the middle and lower order to get you out of trouble. And not saying that's maybe how the series plays out, because both bowling lineups will be strong and blessed with some very good placements. So the top 4 have got their work cut out from both teams. But obviously Australia have got that firepower in the lower order. So have India with Rishabh Pant. But, that top order for Australia moving forward, David Warner's obviously, he struggled in the last couple of years of his career. And they've been looking at all those options. And the fact they didn't pick Bancroft, Harris or Renshaw in the last sort of 18 months when Warner was, not doing as well as he had in the prime of his career, that spoke volumes, I think, for where the selectors were thinking of how they rated those 3. Because I think, McSweeney's jumped him, and now young Constas, if he keeps on the trajectory he's on and has a very good Shield summer this year for New South Wales, then he could well be in the mix to keep or get that spot when Khawaja retires or whenever, whatever happens with his career in the next 12 months or so.
And how important is this series for Alex Carey, given Josh Inglis's form with the gloves and, importantly, with the bat?
Yeah, massive series for Alex Carey. I think it's great that Josh Inglis is in the squad. I think he's thoroughly deserved it. I think, between him, Constas and McSweeney, they're all in the mix for that sort of role. But I think Australia realised that he's probably more suited to that sort of number 6 role, which he does so well for WA. His form's been outstanding. He's a very good gloveman. But the positive is it's driving Alex Carey to be in prime form himself. He's had a magnificent start for South Australia in all formats. And I think that's good for Alex Carey because, he needs to be at his best in this series, not just with the gloves, but also with the bat to enable Australia to win this series because it's a crucial role at 7. There are going to be some tests where, potentially the top order fails and we're going to need runs out of Head, Marsh and Carey at 7. So I think he deserves the opportunity. But the good thing is from Australia's perspective, they've got a very good understudy in Josh Inglis at the moment who's putting him under huge pressure.
And are you happy to see Steve Smith back at 4?
Look, I didn't mind the decision. The reason I agreed with it was because I agreed that they needed to get Cameron Green in that team. And I think the decision was proved right by the way that Cameron Green played in New Zealand. And I think it's important for this team not just to obviously try and win test matches now, but they've got to have an eye to the future as well. And I think they can afford to do it with the level of experience they've got in that top 6 at the moment. They're all highly experienced players. It's a highly experienced bowling lineup. So there definitely needs to be at least one young batsman in that team. And now obviously, with McSweeney coming in, he's replaced Green being injured. But I think, as this team evolves, it's really important that Steve Smith now goes back to his main role at number 4. He's averaged over 60 there in his career, which is just superb. And it's his preferred spot. But I didn't mind the decision for them to do that. He was happy to put his hand up then, but obviously now the dynamics change with Green being injured and they realise they have to shuffle the deck again. So fair enough. You can't really question this hierarchy too much. They've been making some very good decisions over the last few years and winning all the big competitions that they've needed to.
What have you made of India's secret training sessions? Is this the India we know?
Well, I guess like anything, you want to probably keep a few things behind closed doors. Not a lot of teams do this around the world, but given the scrutiny that they're under, the Indians, and what they're coming in off, a poor result against New Zealand, they probably felt that was the right way to go about it. It still feels like there's been a little bit, in the press about how they've trained and what happened at the WACA the other day. I remember reading something about the fact that, a lot of the batsmen struggled in the intra-club intra-team hit out. And a lot of the batsmen were getting nicked off at the WACA. So I think that hopefully will get out to the Australian quicks and they'll be enjoying hearing that. But they know that, come Friday in Perth, it'll be game on. And this is a quality Indian team, and they'll be smarting from what happened against New Zealand. So expect them to come out and be, really shocked into action by their recent results.
I did hear one of those days they had 3 local leggies bowling to them in the nets. So I couldn't for the life of me work out why. There's not really a threat of a leg spinner in that Australian.
Confidence building, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. It could be. What are your, just a couple of ones to finish, Simon, your favourite memories playing against India? You did have a good success rate against them. Any particular test you fondly look back on?
Look, I think probably the highlight of my career as a team was winning in India in 2004. I think it was the final frontier for that era of Australian cricket. Steve Waugh talked about it and couldn't quite get the job done in 2001. And then I was fortunate to go there in 2004 and play a role batting at 3, which suited me, and really loved that tour. Adam Gilchrist was captain, did a magnificent job. Our quicks and Warney was superb, and a lot of the batsmen stood up and got runs as well. So that probably stands out. And then probably playing in Steve Waugh's last test against India in early 2004 at the SCG. I got my first test 100 against India there, and that was pretty special as well. So, yeah, it's always a great rivalry, and I think it's gotten better and better over the years. And this current generation, Kohli v. Smith, 2 of the greats of the modern game, going head-to-head, and there's been, conjecture around where they're both at with their games. It promises to be an amazing series, and I can't wait to watch it all unfold.
I'll put you on the spot. Who wins, and what's the series scoreline?
I predicted Australia. I just think we've got too much class in our bowling lineup, and I'm reluctant to bet it against Pat Cummins because he's just superb. He knows what to do at the right time. He's getting the best out of this group. I reckon he's gotten the best out of Travis Head and Mitch Marsh in the last couple of years since they've come back in the team. Same with Usman Khawaja. So I just think Australia to win, but I think it'll be close. So I've tipped 3-2. I've tipped Rishabh Pant to be the leading run scorer for India and Pat Cummins to be the man of the series.
Well, no draws. I really like that. Simon Katich, looking forward to hearing your thoughts during commentary for Channel 7 this summer. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.